my name is Debie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. Today I want to talk about the 2021 European Union Standard Contract Clauses. Standard contract clauses have been used for decades when companies are transferring data out of the EU into other countries. This is because the EU recognized many decades ago that their laws about the protection of individuals' data, which is part of their fundamental human right in their constitution, may be very different than other countries. So they created standard contract clauses as an easier way for companies to try to do these data transfers. So the EU started using standard contract clauses or created them in 2001. They've had a couple of minor updates up to 2010, but they haven't been updated since then. So a lot has happened in the world since 2001, as you may know, and a lot of the tech companies and a lot of the data sharing that happens today didn't exist back in 2001. So the EU updated these standard contract clauses partially because of the invalidation of the Privacy Shield framework. So as part of that invalidation of the Privacy Shield framework, that judgment also supported standard contract clauses. But again, because standard contract clauses hadn't been updated even before the GDPR came out, a lot of people who were using them or needed to start using standard contract clauses as a result of the safe harbor and the Privacy Shield invalidation didn't really understand how standard contract clauses connected in with the GDPR. So I highly recommend that people look very closely at the implementation documentation as it relates to standard contract clauses, because it explains in very great detail how standard contract clauses plug in to the GDPR. Also, there are a couple of really big important deadlines as it relates to standard contract clauses. Again, standard contract clauses are the most popular way that companies do these data transfers. I think the last statistic that I saw is that 80% of companies that do these transfers out of the EU use standard contract clauses. So the clauses came out June 4th, 2021. As of June 27th, any new contracts that relate to these types of data transfers have to use the new standard contract clauses, and any existing contracts that are active and are using these clauses have until December 27, 2022 to update their contracts. So this is a huge deal for a lot of companies around the world to do these data transfers. Also, I think one thing that the standard contract clauses are doing as it relates to the Schrems II case and the invalidation is they touch on additional obligations that companies may have as it relates to government requests for documentation or data about individuals. So there are places within these clauses that say that either a data exporter or importer, that's the language that they're using, as opposed to as opposed to data processor and a data controller. So a data controller is an exporter, a data processor is an importer. So there are 4 standard contract clauses. So there are more clauses now than there were before, more flexibility. The acknowledgement that sometimes there are multiple processors or multiple multiple exporters or multiple importers of data. Also, I think the standard contract clauses are doing something that the GDPR isn't doing, which is kind of dips its toe a bit into kind of government surveillance or data collection without the knowledge of individuals. So there are things in clauses about if a company or a data importer is contacted by the government to collect data, there is a mechanism within these clauses that they're supposed to let the data importer or exporter know and possibly contact a supervisory authority, and then also to be able to I don't know if the word is pushback, but be able to defend this data even all the way through appeals processes. So that's definitely a big deal. It's going to be a very interesting next 18 months as we see companies try to work and use these new clauses and work through what it means for their risk in terms of how they handle data that is transferred out of the EU. That's it. Thank you.